Another big story we have been covering now for about 2.5 weeks. Major uncertainty from law enforcement concerning the massacre of those 4 University of Idaho students. Police now say they do not know if the victims were specifically targeted, and this comes as investigators start to receive forensic testing results. Fox News correspondent Christina Coleman is in Moscow, Idaho, with the latest for us.
It's definitely confusing, and we're just kind of hoping that we get some answers soon.
Moscow police threw people for a loop last night when they said they did not know if 4 University of Idaho students murdered more than 2 weeks ago were victims of a targeted attack. That was a major reversal from what they have been saying.
We've told the public very clearly from the beginning that we believe it was a targeted attack.
But by this morning, they reversed themselves, saying that they do indeed believe this was a targeted attack. The back and forth leaving both students and local residents confused and worried.
Hearing this gives me kind of a pause to think back and forth, like what is our sense of safety here in Moscow?
I don't like it one bit.
Steve Gonzalez is the father of Kaylee, one of the 4 victims. Grieving his daughter's loss, he is frustrated.
I know these statements take like hours and multiple individuals to review. It's not like this was something said on the side of the street within the first 5 hours of the case.
Meantime, the community continues to grieve. The University of Idaho held a candlelight vigil to honor the slain students. Parents of 3 of the victims spoke from the heart.
I want to remind you that that's the most important message that we have for you and your families, is to make sure that you spend as much time as possible with those people, because time is precious and it's something you can't get back.
Madison Mogan's father is urging people to come forward if they can help with the investigation.
If anyone knows anything, please just help out and just give us some closure and some so we can move on and get through these days a little easier.
Also, there's some progress in this investigation. Idaho State Police say detectives are starting to receive test results from some of the forensic evidence in this case. Reporting in Moscow, Idaho, Christina Coleman, Fox News.
All right, Christina, thank you so much for that report. This is a story that so many people have been talking about, as there are just so many questions about the case. We know that no arrests have been made and no suspects still named. So I do want to bring in Joe Thompson. He is a retired NYPD crime scene detective there to kind of give his input on this situation, again, that so many people are talking about. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So your thoughts on this case overall? I'm sure that you have been following it very closely, like most people in the country.
Well, yeah, this is a very complex case. I've handled numerous cases similar to this. These cases get, very deep. There's a lot to be done. The processing time on these scenes takes days to weeks sometimes. I feel for these investigators. It's a brutal scene to walk into. I know what it's like. And my heart goes out to the families of the victims here. This is a very terrible tragedy, unspeakable act of cowardness that nobody can explain as of yet.
What are your thoughts on these different news conferences that have been held? We know that police have said it was a targeted attack. They said it was not a targeted attack, and kind of have gone back and forth. From your experience, how do you feel about the way that they are handling it?
Well, in my opinion, it's bad business to be telling the public anything that you're not 100% sure of. The reason I say that is you don't want to tell people it's a targeted attack when you have a possible killer out there on the loose. You kind of lose the trust of the public when you do stuff like that. So, I would hope that they would kind of tighten it up a little bit and not release as much information. The public doesn't need to know about this. The main purpose right now is the main goal here is to find the killer. So the less they tell, the better off they're going to be, especially when we get down the line and go to court with this type of case. Anything that's revealed, could make a difference in the courtroom.
Do you think the flow of information is affected at all by the fact that Moscow police probably do not investigate crimes like this? I mean, I don't know if they have maybe an occasional murder, but to have 4 students stabbed to death in their rooms there, they're not really used to handling a case like that.
Well, yeah, that could certainly play a role in a case like this. I mean, like I said, these cases are very complex. This is, from what I hear, they haven't had a homicide there in 7 years. I do know they have the assistance of the state police and the FBI. I don't know the level of experience that's coming in from the state or where these guys are from or how much experience they have in these types of cases, but they are very complex. You could run into a lot of issues initially, especially with the responding officers. I mean, to secure and preserve a crime scene is paramount when it comes to a scene like this. Every little detail makes a difference. I mean, we've learned from the O.J. Simpson case, and that was with the LAPD, who was, highly experienced in crime scene investigation. We learned a lot from the mistakes they made there. It's very easy to fall into bad habits if you haven't had the experience. So what I mean by saying this is that the initial first responders, if they don't secure the scene correctly, you have people coming in and out. If there's not a correct log of people coming in and out that we could compare to certain things later on, shoe wear impressions, possible hair that might have fallen out of their head. We all shed hair every day. These types of things have to be done initially. Otherwise, the scene gets even more complex when you start adding way more evidence to the scene than was originally there. So there's a theory that we all go by in crime scenes called the Lockhart's theory of transmittal, which means that basically when you walk into a scene, you're bringing something into that scene. And when you walk out of that scene, you're taking something with you. So that's something to be considered here, especially before the more experienced officers may have shown up.
Would you be surprised if police were going to come out to say, let's say today, that they have a suspect, that they've made an arrest? Would that surprise you?
Yeah, that kind of would surprise me. They're giving a lot of information at some of these press conferences, which kind of makes me feel that they don't really have much to go on yet. Again, they're going to have to look into each 4 of these victims' lives. They're going to have to retrace their steps from the night of this horrific incident to back in their lives to see if they had any other enemies. They're going to have to look at the home and find out who lived in that home prior to see if maybe somebody there had a violent enemy or something. They're going to have a lot of homework to do here with this. There's a lot of investigative work that's going to have to go into this. It's going to take quite a bit of time. I don't think it's going to be that clear cut. And then you'll also run into the situation where you could have a suspect that doesn't have DNA on file. So you can collect all the DNA, you could put the story together, you can actually recreate the incident. But the DNA source may come up as an unknown because not everybody has a DNA source on file, so there's nothing to go on. Fingerprints are usually much more easy to find a suspect initially. However, this scene is a super bloody scene. There's going to be blood everywhere. They're going to be looking for visible patent prints and blood all throughout that house. And if they don't get that lucky, then this is going to take some time.
You were with the NYPD, which is a major police department. They see all kinds of cases. How often do you see a case like this, where you're talking about 4 students stabbed to death in their rooms, and at this point, there are just still so many questions? How often is there a case like this?
Well, it actually happens more often than you would think. It's not always a high-profile news thing, but we always did have our share of multiple homicides, victim homicides. Again, they don't always hit the news, the mainstream media, so they don't get the attention that this one is getting, but it does happen more often than you would think. This particular case with 4 college students, I mean, it kind of hits a nerve, I think, in the American public because, we all have kids and our kids go to school and, we should never have to bury our kids, and these, young lives were taken way too short. So, of course, this has gotten a lot of attention.
Why do you think so many people are paying attention? As you mentioned, it is getting a lot of media attention, and so many people do have children, and they are paying close attention for that reason. Why do you think so many people, though, are watching this so closely?
Well, now it's become a mystery. Now it's become, we need to know what's going on. It's like watching a horror movie, and you want to see, who the killer is at the end. And people get fascinated by this kind of stuff. I mean, all this stuff is out on television now, and things that people watch, and video games that these people play, and it's fascinating to some people. And that is definitely one dynamic of this. The challenge of trying to find out who did it.
As somebody who was with the NYPD and has investigated quite a few cases, what advice, if any, would you have for Moscow police as they do move forward in this investigation?
Well, I mean, they have the FBI there. The FBI is a good source of crime scene investigators there. They need to just focus and take their time. This scene is going to be an extremely tough scene to get through. From what I've seen, even blood coming out of one of the rooms on the exterior of the home tells me that, there is going to be blood all throughout this home. They're going to have to take random samplings and try to find commingled blood, because in a lot of cases, especially with a stabbing case, you do get the perpetrator who winds up cutting himself at some point. Their hand slides down a knife and they wind up leaving their own blood. But to find that blood commingled with the victim's blood is going to be a very difficult task, and they're going to have to take numerous samples to try to locate and try to find out the sequence maybe of where he came in from, where he started, what was the first victim, second victim, third victim, fourth victim by blood. And it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to even do that at this point because there's so much blood on that scene. They're going to have to take 3D memorialization of the scene, laser scannings of the scene, and basically that's one of the newest tools that's out there that I can't say enough good things about. Basically, we go in and we recreate the scene in 3D, and that basically gives us a way to go back into the scene later on, even after things have been disturbed and moved and evidence has been collected. We can go back in and take exact measurements, and we can look at certain things and placement of things, and it really is a tremendous tool that they have. And I know the FBI uses the same equipment that we use in the NYPD. It's very high tech and excellent, and I've already heard that they've already been doing that in there. So it seems like they've got everything they need to do. And then just the boots on the ground, they're going to be out there. They're going to be looking for people who were released from prison who have a violent propensity to violence. They're going to be looking for people who maybe applied for a gun license and couldn't get a gun license, and maybe that's another alternative person that they're going to be looking at to see if somebody was attempting to get a gun to make their lives easier with doing something like this and wind up using a knife instead. These are all kinds of things that they have to look at. And I will say one other thing, and nobody really wants to talk about this, and I say this only from the knowledge of investigations. They're going to have to look for any type of drug incidents in this case. And what I mean by this is, you're still talking about college kids. You're still talking about kids that may go out and buy marijuana, they may buy pills. They're going to have to look in the victim's house, in the victim's cars. If they see anything like that, they're going to have to trace that back as well, because we all know that any kind of drugs leads to, violence. So that is definitely going to be one area they may not talk about as much, because nobody's saying that these kids did any drugs or anything like that, but it's still part of a typical investigation to have to go and retrace.
Of course. And at this point, as we mentioned, police have not named any suspects. Do you believe it is possible that they already know who did this and they're just not telling anyone as they do gather that information? Again, this is pure speculation, but does it appear that it is possible they know maybe who did this?
I think that's probably highly unlikely at this point. But you could be right that they could know who did this. I mean, if you get a fingerprint on the scene that comes back and pops on somebody and they just can't locate the person, they're not going to come out and say, well, we have a fingerprint, we've identified a suspect, because that this is all over the news. That person sees this and they're off, and it's gonna be even harder to find them. So when they do find who did this, we're not going to hear about this until this person's in custody, and that's the right way to do this. We don't want to give anybody any tips and leads that says, hey, listen, you know what, we're on to you. And, that's just going to make their lives a lot harder to try to track this person down. So it's possible, but I think probably highly unlikely at this point. Like I said, this is a very complex case. Unless that person's DNA or fingerprints have been on file, then there's a slight chance. DNA takes, a couple weeks to come back. Fingerprints you can do immediately. So it's possible, but probably unlikely at this point.
Something that I'm not hearing a lot of people talk about, and this would also be speculation, is it possible that there is more than one attacker and this wasn't just one person? Because we are talking about 4 people that were killed. One of the parents of the victim saying that it appeared that she had fought back. So I guess, is it possible that there's more than one person involved?
Well, they'll be able to check the fingernail scrapings of each of the victims that have defensive wounds on them. That's one of the standard things that we would do. And they're going to check to see if the DNA, even if it's unknown, we can check to see if that DNA is a match. If there's two unknown DNAs or two different DNAs underneath two of the victims' fingernails or one of the person's fingernails, then we know that we're dealing with more than one perpetrator at this point. They can also try to see if they can, I mean, I don't know, this sounded like it was very violent stabbing attack. Sometimes you can get, impressions from the knife and see if it was the same knife that was used, although I don't know if that's going to be possible in the scene. I'm not familiar with what's going on in that scene, but that would be another way. But more likely it would be the DNA, because even if they don't get a match, they will be able to see if there's multiple unknown people that have DNA profiles in this home. And I will point out one other thing. This is a college rental home. There are going to be a lot of people that have been in this home. There are going to be numerous unknown DNA profiles that are going to pop up in this home just from people being there. Our technology with DNA has come a long way. I will tell you, from back in 2005, I was able to apprehend a suspect based off a dried bead of sweat in a burglary case that was on a TV monitor. So, that was in 2005. Nowadays, the low copy DNA has become so sensitive that just by merely a person being in a room and shedding any kind of skin, we all shed millions of skin cells a day. They will be able to take samples and come up with DNA profiles. So I wouldn't be too alarmed when you keep hearing, oh, we got a DNA profile, because there are going to be many unknown profiles that are going to pop out of this, and they're going to have to take many elimination samples from people, of friends, of people that have been in that home in order to kind of narrow down who the suspect is. Obviously, the suspect's DNA is going to be in the blood. So if they can kind of, get a mixture of blood and find an unknown profile compared to the victims, then we know who a perpetrator is. But yeah, it is going to be a tedious scene. And I really do feel for the investigators here. I have to say that I've been in these types of scenes. I've been in very, very, very gruesome scenes, things that people really shouldn't have to see, but do it for the sake of everybody else. And my hats are all off to all of those investigators out there right now.
For sure. Joe Thompson, retired NYPD crime scene detective there. You have a lot of experience, so we appreciate you joining us to give us that insight. Is there anything else that you want to add before we let you go?
Yeah, just one thing. I just want to tell the public to kind of give these guys a chance. You're not sure what you're dealing with when you walk into a scene like this, and this is even for a highly experienced crime scene team, this is a very, very difficult case to sort through. Let's give them a chance to kind of figure out what's going on, and be vigilant out there. The public is going to be instrumental in trying to find this person as well, because as detectives are going around and trying to interview people and retrace these people's steps, all the information that comes out of that is what's going to help try to put this guy behind bars. So I would urge everybody to kind of just stay positive and give these guys a chance.
Of course. Joe Thompson, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
My pleasure, Josh. Have a great day.